If you thought we'd run out of off-meta roaming top laners in high elo, then think again. This is DangerousBoy ADY, a Korean challenger player who plays Rakan top lane. Well, actually, he doesn't really play top lane. He spends almost the whole game outside of lane, roaming to collect kills mid and bot lane. If you saw this in a silver game, you'd think he was trolling. But this guy is a multiple season challenger player, doing this strategy against Korean pro players and winning. He also disagrees with everything that people know about summoner spells, never taking flash on any champion. He has an unbeatable laning phase, where Rakan always ends up getting ahead. With a huge amount of mobility and playmaking, we may have reached the peak of off-meta. Let me show you why. But first, let me quickly tell you that this video is sponsored by Alienware. They sent me the best PC I have ever had, and you can get one as well at the link in the description. This is the new Alienware Aurora R13, and I've been using it for 2 weeks now, so let me give you a review. Here are all the specs of mine. It's crazy. I've been playing lots of games, including League, which I've been streaming. Playing on full settings, the FPS is super stable, so I never miss anything in an important fight. But the best thing about getting this PC is that it's made me want to play more games. I love League of Legends, surprisingly, but sometimes it's good to take a break. As soon as I got this PC, all I had to do was plug it in, and I could start trying out all the new games I'd missed. Forza Horizon 5, one of the best looking games I've ever played. The R13 handles it on full settings with no lag. This PC is almost silent even while playing. I guess the cooling must be good. Apex Legends, max settings, no issues. I wish the League map looked this good. Halo Infinite I've been enjoying. The grappling hook is the best thing, every game should have one. I've gone for a blue lighting all over. It looks fresh and bright, but you can always change your mind and customize it. I like the white case as well, but it's also available in black. In terms of work, I've been using it for recording and editing for all of the videos recently. It can keep up with whatever I'm working on, buffering as I work on it for smooth previews. Even the rendering times are super fast. Some of the videos it renders faster than the actual length of the video. I don't know how it does that. I'm so glad to finally have a PC that can handle anything I need it for, and that I didn't even need to pay a scalper $1,600 for a graphics card. Alienware are a part of Dell, so it's a brand that you can trust. If you want to get your own R13 or check out any other Alienware products, please click the link in the description. So, why is ADY playing Rakan top? He is actually a player you might recognize from our Challenger Tarek top video, where he had a different roaming strategy, but I think Rakan top is actually quite a lot better. Starting at level 1, Rakan is nothing like our other top lane off-meta players. Early on, the champion is actually good at laning. With a high damage W and attack speed in his runes, he can win early trades, jumping in to knock them up, auto-attacking them while they're in the air, and disengaging with a good trade. But Rakan top is not about winning lane. Look at this matchup against a normal meta top laner. This Rakan is playing a completely different game to Jace. Jace is playing League of Legends. He picked a meta top lane carry champion, and champions like this need to get great farm to afford their expensive items, which let them do damage. They have so much to think about. They have to trade, they have to get farm, they have to avoid the enemy jungler, and then they get to teamfights and have to use all of their damage well. But Rakan top is not playing this game. Rakan is a support who can buy super cheap items, which let him affect the game immediately. If nothing happens in early laning phase, Rakan gets an advantage. He can get to level 6, buy boots, and leave Jace to get his boring top lane CS, where Rakan runs around the map, ganking everyone he can find. Rakan even plays with Corrupting Potion and Phase Rush, so enemies cannot kill him in lane. If enemies go in, he can just Phase Rush and sprint away. Because of this, Rakan is so hard to punish, and since he doesn't need as much gold, he can give up CS and play safe. As long as he gets level 6, he doesn't care. All he wants is a little bit of CS so he can afford boots, and some XP. Enemies are put in a tough position. They have two options. They can pick a scaling pick, outfarm the Rakan, and try and win the game after 30 minutes. Scaling picks are always awful in solo queue compared to early game ones, especially Korean solo queue, where the games are much faster. It's kinda surprising when a game goes over 20 minutes there. The enemies could instead pick an early game champion and try to 50-50 the game, following Rakan around the map. But ADY has been doing this roaming strategy for literal years in high elo. You're not going to beat him with his own strategy without any practice. Rakan is just chilling in lane, using Q on the enemy to heal if they trade, happy to let the wave push into him. If the enemy ever overextends, Rakan has another tool, Exhaust. At any time, Rakan can bait a fight, drawing the enemy in, exhausting them, and trapping them in a gank for an easy kill. If you're not trying to kill Rakan, then you're losing, and if you do, you might just be getting baited. In early 2v2s or 3v3s, Rakan is surprisingly good. His damage and CC are perfect. The champion's main issue is falling off in damage after early game, so ADY is more than happy to join early fights. At level 6, ADY's game plan finally starts. He uses W on the wave to push it, and immediately leaves lane, basing for cooldown boots, so he can make lots of extra plays. Then he walks right into the enemy jungle. With a big AoE charm into a knockup, Rakan is already one of the best champions at setting up picks. But ADY is not happy with just that. He also takes Ghost. You might think, how can you play Rakan without Flash? How does he surprise enemies and land his ult? ADY believes that Ghost is much more reliable for his early roaming strategies, as it lets him easily chase slow enemies who don't yet have boots, and land extra charms with his ult, instead of focusing on one big, flashy engage, which forces his team to flash forwards to follow up on it. Ghost Rakan can instead use the 4 seconds of his ultimate to set up an initial kill, and then run past them to set up a second one. With all of these mobility tools and his E, Rakan can already cover multiple screens of distance in any fight. His special room page again becomes relevant, taking Phase Rush. This helps Rakan extend this engage range even further. In ganks, Rakan can even waste his mobility to set up the play, such as using W to dash over a wall and set up a flank. This champion has a bit too much mobility. That's why these early roams are so consistently good even in Challenger. Comparing it to Taric top lane, Rakan is a much safer fighter, with the ability to dash in and out again at any point. Any play he goes for is never that risky, so he's unlikely to cause a really bad play and give up lots of kills. Locking down a Challenger Rakan is pretty unlikely to happen, especially since he takes Exhaust, so any high damage enemy is immediately going to be useless in a 1 vs 2 and cannot even trade a kill. This summoner spell prevents enemies from turning plays, making sure Rakan's team gets an advantage. ADY's favourite play is to walk straight from base into the enemy jungle, and then decide which lane is gankable. He's been top lane the whole game so far, so enemies expect him to go right back to lane again. Of course, he doesn't. He starts roaming, which surprises enemies every game. In high elo, players are really good at tracking the enemy jungler. It's quite easy for them to do just looking at the enemy CS, counting the camps they've done and predicting which one they'll go to next. But with a full roaming top laner, they have no reason to do anything except gank, so you can't really predict where they're going to go. Roaming to help his teammates, he needs their damage to set up kills, but he does start to get quite a big XP advantage compared to bot laners, actually contributing more damage than you would expect. Since he is still laning top for a portion of the game, he built up this XP lead early on, letting him use the extra stats and player advantage to 3v2 bot lane. This is a whole new style of support, one that out-levels carries. So AD carries or squishy mids stand no chance. Supports are already a little bit overpowered, often solo killing what are meant to be the actual carries, so imagine how rough it is when they also have an XP lead. So this roaming is great, but there's always one big problem. What about top lane? All these roaming players have different ways of dealing with an abandoned lane. Some rely on gold bounties and shutting enemies down, others just ignore it and hope for the best. But surprisingly, ADY sometimes just goes back to lane, especially if he needs to clear waves before an objective. It's often correct for him to return temporarily. For example, in this game his AD carry is dead, his mid is really low health so they can't help with the play, so the best option Rakan has left is getting these resources from top lane. Surprisingly, he still has pretty okay CS, getting over 120 in most games. Even the fact he is playing Rakan top often catches enemies off guard. These may be challenger players, but they still fall for the classic level 6 charm knockup under tower, getting solo killed and giving Rakan even more early game power. ADY, I believe, is the inventor of buying support items top lane, at least in high elo. He's been doing this for years, but he doesn't buy it immediately at the start of the game. As I mentioned, he's farming quite a lot early on, so doesn't want to waste gold. Instead, buying it as soon as he can after he leaves lane, letting him earn gold from the poke, and provide his team with a ton of extra vision. Back to ganking, ADY's game plan is to win the game as fast as possible, grabbing Shurelias to set up plays, and as much ability haste as he can to continuously spam ultimate and get kills for his carries. Screw the meta of getting Dragon Soul. ADY is finishing these games in 16 minutes by destroying the enemy's mental and tilting them to AFK in base. Most of his games are super fast, but occasionally there's an exception, and ADY messes something up. ADY is a good example of how even challenger players are not perfect, but can have a ton of success. He's not perfect because, like any player, he takes risks to get ahead. The majority of the time, these risks work incredibly well, but occasionally they don't. He makes mistakes like this, inting a kill to the enemy AD carry under tower, but since this style is so high tempo, this doesn't slow him down. He gets his cooldowns back very quickly, running right back to the enemy side of the map and setting up a pick on the enemy Akali. As soon as one play is over, he moves on to the next. The past is irrelevant. He needs to use 100% of his brain power on what he's going to do next. This is exactly the kind of mindset everyone should have in solo queue. You want to fight, maybe trade kills, and even if you die, you want to get an advantage. Then go on to get the next one. The faster he moves on, the more time he gets to outthink enemies. If early game doesn't go to plan, and ADY is forced into a longer game, he must join Teamfights. Buying Randuins for another CC tool, he gains utility with the AoE slow, making it much easier for his teammates to reach the kills that he's setting up. But he also becomes a frontline. With his new tankiness and his stupid movement speed, he runs circles around enemies, landing big combos and getting out as soon as he can. Not having flash doesn't hurt his engages as much as you would think. It mostly hurts his ability to escape afterwards. As the play is a bit more predictable, he can still hit ult on more enemies thanks to his new speed. Even though they know it's going to happen, they're not fast enough to escape. All they can do is try and kill him afterwards. The fights look a bit complicated, but all he wants to do is land a good ultimate, knocking up the enemy carries, then return to his carries, providing peel, letting his teammates either dive enemies, or peeling for his teammates so they can kite. Let's give this pick a rating on our off-meta tier list. Overall, this pick has everything you want in solo queue. Rakan Top has a brick wall of a laning phase strategy that stops enemies getting any advantage, leading into a tilt-inducing, surprise roaming section that's too mobile and unpredictable for enemies to track. In high elo, this pick is as good as Yuumi Top, except for one factor: the scaling. ADY does his absolute best to make Rakan a good late game pick, with extra utility and tankiness, but no support can quite match this abomination. So the rating for this build, I would say, is a high 8 out of 10. Mechanically, this guy is challenger no problem, and it's super nice to see him inventing something instead of following the usual meta. He could be a challenger Renekton, Jace, Camille main, anything he wants, but he chooses to climb as high as he can, even higher rank than Faker, with only fun picks, because after all, that's what solo queue should be. Quickly, here's the full build: Corrupting for lane sustain, into cooldown boots for playmaking, Shurelias as your mythic, straight into tank, Randuins versus AD and for the slow, then Force of Nature, to finally be the top lane tank your team needs in the late game. Thanks so much to Alienware for their incredible sponsor. Please check them out at the link in the description. Also, our channel just hit 150,000 subscribers, so thank you all so much. Subscribe if you haven't already, and thanks so much for watching.